All right, it looks like it's going to be a wet day for sure here in HRM, and like I always say, though, it's better than snow. And look, it's still March, right? So you never know what's going to happen with the weather in March. So we'll take the mild temperatures and the rain any day of the week. A Nova Scotia government bill that would open the door to fracking for fossil fuels and exploring for uranium is dangerous and should be scrapped. Environmental advocates and physicians told a legislature committee on Monday. The proposed legislation would repeal a law prohibiting uranium exploration to allow for research on the presence of the metal in Nova Scotia and change the Petroleum Resources Act to create the potential for hydraulic fracking on natural gas. So one of the things that I'll ask you to weigh in on when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time today, should Nova Scotia lift the ban on fracking and exploration for uranium and explore the development of other natural resources as well? Economic benefits, self-sufficiency, are they needed? And these resources will be needed for decades to come, perhaps, or a hard no, not worth the risk, and should focus on renewables. And do special interest groups have too much influence, or are they playing an important role? So those are some questions that I'm going to ask you to consider and to talk about, because even the term special interest group is, of course, some describe it as pejorative in nature. I suppose you could call the Ecology Action Centre, that they would fit into that category if you're going to use that term. But again, some would say that they are important organizations playing an important role and raising important questions. So these are some things that I'm going to ask you about. Again, the big debate on fracking and development of natural resources, and all of this, of course, was not part of the Progressive Conservatives campaign, in which they of course won that supermajority, which they're enjoying, but none of this was mentioned during the campaign. This all was brought to light, of course, in the wake of what Donald Trump has done and tariffs, and the threat of tariffs. And the premier of the province, who has been in the studio talking about this, saying that it's important for the province to be self-sufficient, and this is part of the journey to self-sufficiency. So what are your thoughts on this? Also, politics. A whirlwind first quarter of 2025 has swept up Canadian politics and tossed it back down in an unrecognizable jumble. New data from the non-profit Angus Reid Institute finds the governing Liberal Party, led by newly sworn-in Prime Minister Mark Carney, surging to a 5-point vote intention advantage nationally after trailing by 29 points in late December. Imagine that, almost 30 points. In late December, they were behind, and now all of a sudden they're ahead in the polls. And according to which poll you look at, they're all pretty much saying the same thing to varying degrees, but pretty much indicating the same thing, that the Liberals have surged, and I mean really surged. So what is going on here? What are the factors in this stunning turnaround? Obviously, Justin Trudeau's departure. He was immensely unpopular at the end of this thing. And Mark Carney, well, he seems to be resonating with people. Also, Pierre Poilievre, is his messaging just simply worn out? Axe the tax, kind of some of these slogans that Poilievre has been known for. Is his shtick worn out? And what about the Trump factor? And which of any of these leaders do you trust? And which leader is the better choice to handle Donald Trump? Again, some things that you can talk about when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time. Hope to hear from many of you, and whatever else you want to get into. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Ness as well on the other side of the glass, the control boards, doing a fine job as always. All right, joining me here in studio is Robert Huish, Associate Professor at Dalhousie University, here, of course, in Halifax. And Robert, thanks for joining the show.
Good morning, Todd. Good to see you.
Yeah, so what do you think of some of those questions?
Oh, geez. Isn't it a great time to pay attention to the news?
Yeah, that's right.
I think, the political climate that's changed in Canada so much. Mr. Carney, Mr. Poilievre, that is monumental, right? You look back, what was it, 6 months ago, and nobody, I think, could have saw this. If the word was on the street 6 months ago, say, would you put Mark Carney in now before the Conservatives come to power, right? Like, that was sort of it. But now it's really, really questionable. And part of that, I think, has to be related to the chaos that is coming out of Washington that's impacting the whole world. We are seeing day after day here new developments and regressions about the trade war that the U.S. has against Canada. Let's not forget, this is the staging ground for the U.S.'s global trade war. So Mr. Carney right now is in Europe trying to build up some solidarity and some conversations with his European partners who he thinks, and who many experts also believe, are next in line for Trump's tariffs. So right now, a few key commodities are at play, but what's coming up next is more blanket, wide-spreading tariffs from Trump basically to the world.
Is that an advantage for Canada if Trump is perhaps not just targeting Canada and targeting Europe? I would think that that'd be good for us, would it not?
It will, because we were the first stage for Trump's aggression. And you look at it historically, when presidents come into power, Canada is usually the first spot where they take interest in. Usually it's just bringing them in for a diplomatic hello, and they test out Air Force One and they drive the limo around Ottawa. But in this case, we were the sounding board for this discussion on tariffs, as well as in Mexico. Every country in Europe right now has some sort of grievance with the United States. If it's Trump's promise to abandon NATO, if it's the aggression with the G7. I mean, Trump even wrote a letter to Norway insulting them, saying that they didn't have a sense of how to govern themselves. So it's hard to pick a fight with the Norwegians, but there we have it. And what most of Europe is trying to figure out right now is how do they open themselves up to new opportunities for the next 4 years, or at least the next 2 years, so that they can survive as well economically. There's a lot of different cards on the table right now, and the big equation that holds everything together is this instability, this insecurity. And just look at the markets last week, Todd. It's down 9%, the stock markets in the States. That's just the beginning. I think there's probably another 21% that we could see heading down, because the Wall Street gang and the financiers, they thought, well, hey, Trump had a good stock market run in his first term. Maybe that'll be enough. But they're seeing that he's doubling down on these tariffs, which historically do not create jobs. They do not prompt economic growth. And he's going with this. And so now there's a lot of insecurity with investors that say, what is going to happen for the next 3.5 years?
You would think that as the markets tank and as the economy struggles, at some point he's going to have to give, will he not?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at this through a rational, normal, on-board individual's frame of view here, you would say that, okay, he's made some mistakes, and that's going to be, they got to go back to the old ways. What if it's actually going down a different turnpike, where the purpose of this first 2 months in office of this severely erratic behavior is actually about trying to destroy a lot of the normalcy of the way the U.S. system works? Financially, you look at it, the way the government itself is run, how many people he's put on furlough and laid off completely, reducing the U.S. Security structures to get intelligence on the U.S. enemies and adversaries around the world. He's starting to really dismantle some of the key components that the federal government had some level of oversight onto. And is that because there's something that he, Mr. Musk, others are hoping will take its place? I mean, there's some murmurs in the background here where Musk and some of the others are actually more eager to get cryptocurrencies back in the mainstream, as opposed to trying to make sure that the Fed is secure and that the U.S. is open for foreign investment.
Wow. All right, so I want to get to interprovincial trade, because this is why I asked you in, but I mean, there's so many things to talk about here. What are your thoughts on the development of natural resources and fracking?
Well, I think the one thing we've heard so far is that there's opportunity here to produce those resources. Uranium is something that has been sort of gingerly touched at best because of health, environmental concerns that were raised in the 1980s and beyond. Other provinces, Saskatchewan in particular, big uranium producer, and in the Atlantic in particular, we are still pretty dependent upon carbon fuels. Are there other alternatives that today in 2025 are proven safe, are proven effective to provide cleaner, greener energy. Of course, the issue with it is the disposal of used product. And that is a question that should be taken very seriously about where any sort of waste materials go and have a lot of surveillance around it. But at the time that we're in right now, where we're not able to count on international markets for energy, there are risks to potential job losses in the middle of a tariff war. What sort of opportunities lie here? It's an important question to be putting on the table, and we've seen that economies and science have changed dramatically over the last 40 years.
Yeah, for sure. Is it economically? I've heard of the royalty structure is not what it should be, and it's perhaps not the economic boon that some would suggest that it should be. Do you think that it is, or what are your thoughts on all that?
So that's a good question. And you look at the way that mining particular has worked globally. And if it's a diamond mine in the Northwest Territories or Nunavut, or if it's a uranium mine in Saskatchewan, typically you see the wealth that comes with extraction very, very concentrated at the top. Right? It's the owners, it's the managements. It's companies that will often rely on junior companies to take the cost up of doing the prospecting and the surveying and all that initial infrastructure. They get absorbed up, and then from there, once the rights are granted, then the bigger companies sort of take advantage of it. Very, very classic. The gold industry is right into that. Just look at any mine operation in South Africa. You're not seeing a lot of outward horizontal economic growth from it. You see miners often working in very challenging conditions where the companies themselves tend to do very, very well. So that's a risk. That's definitely a risk to it. Will it create some level of employment and sort of the wider spread employment that comes from trucking or resources that are needed or local industries? Yeah, that could be. But the thing is with any sort of labor issue or new prospectus for labor development in the province, is that in the time of a tariff war, these are topics that are up for discussion. How do those relationships work? What sort of guaranteed benefits can come to workers so that wealth just isn't concentrated and sent out of the province?
Yeah. When it comes to natural gas, the premier said that we've got enough natural gas to last here domestically. I think it was hundreds of years, but that wouldn't be the ideal market locally because the economy of scale. With 1 million people, I would think exporting that would be to maximize the profit. What are your thoughts?
I think so too. I mean, look at how many people in Nova Scotia actually have access to natural gas right
not
now.
Many.
Not many. I
don't know anybody.
No, you see the propane bottles here, right, on the sides of the houses. And the thing is with it, just look out the window anywhere in Halifax and you see the cranes going or the diggers having at it, and it's tough soil to dig through and put pipelines. So that's huge costs. However, if you have the natural gas, you can put it in liquid natural gas format. There's ports all through Europe that will happily take that in. And countries like Germany and France in particular, they have found themselves in the last few years to be quite dependent on gas and petroleum products from Russia. I think they're looking for new markets.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's talk about interprovincial trade. This is something that has been brought up, but there's always two sides to everything, and there's always negative aspects to everything. And this story I read from the Canadian Press is Canada vows to knock down internal trade barriers. Unions representing workers at 2 large breweries in Newfoundland say easy beer sales between provinces would put local jobs at risk. And this is inevitable, right? That you're going to have winners and losers. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, and the point that we're hearing here from the Union for Brewers in Newfoundland is exactly this case. There's going to be some worry that the management, the corporation, can just shut down the local industry, flood the market with something from somewhere else. So that is a concern. There are some logistics that are involved here that could prevent that from happening. So in a way, we're seeing sort of a classic union versus management discussion. The management's always out to get the little guy. Now, the thing is with beer in particular, we've seen this done in the past. And I remember in Ontario, there was the Creemore Springs Brewery, which was just to the south of Georgian Bay. Maybe call it about an hour and 20, depends how fast you drive north of Toronto to get there. And this brewery was provincially, had a provincial market, but they also had a specialty of brewing this stuff in a copper kettle. They were bought out by Molson, and that was one of the big concerns to say, well, would the jobs be lost in Creemore by trying to expand the market. And the agreement that was put into place was no. The original breweries there, they still fill up the water truck, and there's more bottling, and they've actually expanded production in Creemore as a result of it. So you seek in things like beer that sometimes doesn't travel very well. There's a reason we don't see a lot of craft brews from BC on local shelves here, not just because of interprovincial tariffs, but because it'll spoil with the transit. Similar thing could be for Newfoundland. I know the union said that they can truck in the finished product, but right now it's still easier to truck in the raw ingredients, brew it in Newfoundland, and then make that market viable for Newfoundland and Labrador. So all that is that when we see these things come down, we got to recognize again we're not in normal times. We're in tariff war times, and any government, provincial, federal, if they see concerns like this coming up, that's their role to keep the corporations on point to say, no, you got 60 jobs here in Newfoundland. What are you going to do if we lower this to protect that? The big thing is that we got to remember here that we hear probably more complaints like this coming up. Mm-hmm. Tariffs don't create jobs. So by maintaining interprovincial tariffs, you're not creating any jobs. Right. You might be maintaining a few. Right. But on the other hand, free trade, yes, it usually does create jobs, but the question is where. Yeah. And it can actually increase jobs in far parts of the country. The big comments here with these interprovincial tariffs, or that we have right now, is of course labor, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of the Red Seal labor groups and associations that have trouble sending people back and forth across provinces. That will get easier. So there will be opportunity for growth there for sure.
But job losses like this, it's only 50 jobs, but it makes for a headline, right? People read it, and it's easier to focus on these job losses than the potential benefits of reducing interprovincial trades, which will result in things down the road which have not come to fruition yet.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a soft spot for Newfoundland that has in the past seen massive job losses in various sectors with changing federal policies. So there's a bit of a sensitivity there for sure. And the thing is with this, when these changes are coming forward, we can't be in a position to just say, it's going to be business as usual. We got to make sure that even if it is 50 jobs, that they need to be protected to some degree with these changes. Yeah. If you look, again, more globally, countries that suffer tariffs, suffer sanctions, that have economic weapons like that imposed on them, the way they get through it is by maintaining maximum employment. It's when you have unemployment in a tariff war, that's when the whole thing spins out.
Sure. Time always flies when you're in here, Robert. Thanks for doing it. I appreciate it, pal.
Pleasure, Todd. Good to see you.
Okay, we'll have you back soon. Robert Huish, Associate Professor at Dalhousie University. Nova Scotia plans to charge non-residents a 10% tax to buy property. Realtors say it's a bad idea. That when we come back. All right, this story I read on the CBC website. The headline, Nova Scotia plans to charge non-residents 10% tax to buy property. Realtors say it's a bad idea. Joining us to talk about all of this is Suzanne Gravel, incoming president of the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors. Suzanne, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us about this 10%, I guess,
okay.
I don't know what we call it. It's a tax, right? Call it what it is.
It is a provincial deed transfer tax that the government is looking to implement. We currently have a 5% provincial deed transfer tax on non-residents. They want to increase that to 10%. So what this essentially does is it, besides the optics of it, is it puts $10,000 onto every $100,000 of a purchase for a non-resident. Outside of Halifax, any small town, 10,000 people or less, it does not fall under the foreign buyers ban. So they're pretty popular places for people outside the province to be wanting to move to. And what this particular tax does is it makes a person think twice about coming to Nova Scotia, and we're wondering why they're wanting to do this. We have examples of how this tariff that's not even implemented yet, how it has affected people wanting to sell and people wanting to buy, and developments that are already in process, in the progress of being developed, that the developers are going, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this in Nova Scotia? Why am I spending tens of millions of dollars in a province where they want to deter people from buying properties?
Well, is it not to give an advantage? I think what I'm reading in the story here, the government says that they want to give an advantage to Nova Scotians who want to buy these properties, and it gives them a leg up. Do you believe that, or do you believe that it's effective or not?
That there is no evidence to support that. So we're still in a market that we do see competing offers. It certainly isn't anywhere to the degree that it was a few years back, but we do see competing offers between $350,000, $500,000. Those are pretty popular. Those are what become the normal prices now. So there is, but those don't happen in areas where this tariff, this 10%, is going to affect a lot of people. So no, I don't buy that. I don't buy that that's going to give Nova Scotians a leg up. As a matter of fact, it's going to deter people from purchasing properties. Sellers are looking at a reduced sale price on their home, where buyers are looking at increasing the price by 10%, and not just that, but they have to add the local deed transfer tax in on that as well. So if you're in a 1.5% normal deed transfer tax area, it's 11.5% for you. So that's tough to talk about. That's to justify that.
Okay, so when all is said and done, if it's not effective, why does the government? Is this optics? Do you think is just to be seen as protecting Nova Scotians and their opportunities? Is that what it looks like here?
We have contacted the Premier's office and a few other official offices to try to get a response and a justification that is justifiable.
Yeah.
And we've not really had any kind of a response. We've repeatedly asked to be in on discussions. We are the largest authority on housing in Nova Scotia. We're 2,100 members strong. Mm-hmm. So we cover the entire province, and we speak to probably, and I'm not saying that every realtor is working, that every 2,100 members, but take 50% of that. And I'm sure that they are. And we probably speak to a minimum of 10 people a day regarding housing in Nova Scotia. Why aren't we brought in on these discussions to discuss the pros and cons of implementing such a tax? We're just over 1 million people. It's not like we're a huge province that we're going to be collecting a great deal of money. So yes, it comes down to optics. And, we've had medical professionals wanting to purchase homes, needing help from their parents. Mm-hmm. And suddenly the parents, they need to be on title. So they're from out of province. And the parents are going to be subject to 2/3 of that payment because they have to go on title and they don't live here. Yeah. So, it's instances like that. You go, okay, they decided to move to another province because of that. So we lost a medical professional, and the tariff isn't even enacted yet.
Are you concerned that people may hear this and they say this is just these are wealthy people who can afford wealthy homes and therefore they kind of tune out?
No, because it's not. It doesn't. This affects every single person. This is not something that's aimed at wealthy people or not. It does not matter what your pay grade is on this. Whether you're buying a $250,000 house, I mean that's a lot of money. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
All right, so
I wish we had $250,000 homes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So if you're from anywhere out of province, Canadian, American, whatever, you pay a 10%, and that's again above and beyond, because I know here in HRM, I think it's 1.5% because I purchased a home about 4 years ago. So that's above and beyond that 1.5%.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're talking about a lot of money here. That's a lot of money here.
It is. I know. It's $11,500 per $100,000.
That's a lot of bucks right there.
It is a lot of bucks. And we have a person up in Cape Smoky that is developing a beautiful, come visit us tourism opportunity in an area that has been quite depressed forever. Yeah. And now he's developing that, and it's in a non-foreign buyers ban area, right? Or it's in he's not affected by that.
Yeah.
So he, on his own dime, tens of millions of dollars, has put that money out. And he's not the only one. Mm-hmm. Other places as well, down the Yarmouth area, down the South Shore, across the way to Digby area. Lots and lots of places are looking at, expanding their tourism. And this is what we're telling our neighbors in New Brunswick. If you live in New Brunswick and you want to buy here, this is what you're going to have to do. So therefore, people wanting to leave the United States, one is a Canadian, the other one is not. How is that going to be handled? So we're not asking it to be 100% taken away. We'd like it to be, why not make it 2.5%? Why not put a 1% on top of the current local deed transfer tax? Yeah. Make it palatable. Make it so that if one person is Nova Scotian, the other one is not, don't make them pay at all. Mm. Like there has to be a discussion, which we've not had the opportunity to do, because we have solutions, ideas, and recommendations that will make Nova Scotians happy to welcome everyone into our province. But we need to be consulted first. Yeah,
and it's just a straight cash grab for the province. They do nothing. They don't earn the money. It's just straight cash grab for the province.
Well, it is, and they did not make an awful lot of money on the 5%, just over like $11 million.
Yeah, exactly.
In billions of dollar budget. Yeah. That's hardly anything. Yeah. So what are they anticipating now? They take the tolls off the bridges. Where are they trying to collect that money from? Yeah. Yeah. Good. It's making decisions that consult the experts, and realtors are the experts in every community in this province.
Suzanne, let's talk again soon. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time.
All right, Todd. Thanks so much for reaching out.
All right, take care. Suzanne Gravel, incoming president of the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors. Atlantic Canada, the happiest region at work. That when we come back. Atlantic Canada has emerged as the happiest region at work. And joining us to talk about all of this is Heather Haslam, VP of Marketing at ADP Canada. Heather, thanks for joining the show.
Good morning, Todd. Thank you so much for having us.
For sure. What is ADP Canada all about, first of all?
So ADP Canada is a leader in all things HR. So we help Canadian employers, Canadian businesses activate their people and get the most out of them. So everything from hiring to retiring, everything from payroll to performance management, benefits, everything that impacts workers in the region.
All right, so tell us about the methodology that went into determining that Atlantic Canada is the happiest region at work.
Yeah, so each month, ADP Canada issues the Happiness at Work Index, and it's part of our commitment to really just add deeper insights into the workplace in Canada. And what we're trying to do is provide Canadian workplaces, so decision makers, HR professionals, people leaders, with this regular, close to real-time pulse of how the Canadian workforce is feeling within their current workplace and work environment. And what we're hoping to do is support organizations by giving them this insight so that they know what's working and know what maybe they should be improving. And the index really is made up of two parts, Todd. The first part is half of the score, which is the primary score, which is how are you feeling in your current role and responsibility on a score from 1 to 10. And then the second half is made up of 4 secondary factors. And those go from work-life balance and flexibility, compensation and benefits, recognition and support, as well as options for career advancement. Because these secondary factors are the things that help drive us overall happiness at work.
Okay, so what are some of the more interesting statistics or details that came out of all of this, do you think?
Well, first, that Atlantic Canada's on the rise, so both improving and from a regional perspective across the country, the happiness at work, or the happiest at work right now is something certainly worth noting. What we find, we've been doing this now, Todd, for 2 years, and there's seasonality that impacts this. There are differences across the generations. So we look at scores not just across different regions in Canada, but across different generations. And what we know also is that we're impacted by things that are happening outside of the workplace as well. And so when I look at seasonality, speaking specifically to, Atlantic Canada and some of the trends that we've seen over time, Todd, when you think about, there were wildfires happening, our happiness at work dipped down. So we need to look at not just a point in time, but also what's happening in and out of our workplaces.
Now, work-life balance and flexibility. I mean, these are things that I think the pandemic really they're already important, but I think the pandemic really put them into the forefront. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, it's one of the it's one of the secondary scores, and actually specifically in Atlantic Canada, one of the strongest scores. So across all regions, it's the highest at 6.9, and actually over time we've seen that go up even to 7. And so work-life balance is critical when employers and people leaders know their people and understand what work-life balance means to them, because of course it's different for all of us. It's different based on our role, but also where we are in our stage of life, which taps into that generational insight, as well as what our priorities are. So when employers take time to know the individual and to know what work-life balance actually means to them and what some of the nuances for that flexibility are, that certainly helps. And obviously, Atlantic Canada, at the highest region, is doing very well at that. And because we've only been looking at it, over the past 2 years, I can't really speak to what was happening prior to the pandemic, but I think, without question, certainly our ability to focus on what's important as well outside of our workplaces certainly became critical during the pandemic.
I find compensation benefits at 6.5 out of 10, which you would think at one point that would be the first thing that people would talk about, would be what's the pay, what are the benefits. But it is now number 3 on your, or it's certainly not number 1, which I find interesting.
Well, it's not all about money. Yeah. Money matters, and the benefits matter. But if you're in a workplace where, let's say, you're getting paid really well, but that work-life balance isn't there, and you're sacrificing so much of what needs to happen outside of the workplace for that money, your happiness will dip, as well as those other factors. If you're in an environment where you're getting paid a lot of money, but there is no option for career advancement, no development opportunities, that's not terribly motivating. So it's really a balance between all of the secondary indicators that drive happiness overall. One of the things, though, that I do want to highlight is compensation and benefits in Atlantic Canada is one of the highest scores across the country. And we've been up. So we're up to 6.5, and I want to ground all of our listeners in the fact that that's a very strong number relative to other regions in the country.
Recognition and support, 6.4 out of 10. This is something, again, it ties in with what we're talking about, the intrinsic value of recognition and support going along with work-life balance and flexibility. Again, some of the non-tangibles, perhaps?
But very important, yeah. Right? When I feel valued, when I feel recognized, when I feel like my really hard work and dedication is going to be rewarded and seen, that is very motivated, and that taps into psychological safety in the workplace and feeling that I'm well supported. What I will highlight again for our listeners is that that's dropped, so down to 6.4. is one of the lowest across the country, and it's dropped. And we believe that there's a tremendous opportunity to recognize that right now and to be able to, without a whole pile of money always, improve that score, right? So things like understanding how individuals want to be recognized, what's important to them, what support is required, calling out when somebody has gone above and beyond. Somebody's doing a good job, but not everybody wants to be called out in the same way. So again, really understanding your people and understanding what recognition and support means to them is something that will help people leaders, HR folks, decision makers understand how it is that we need to support improving that score, because that's one where, I don't know, when my son comes home with a report card where the score is going down, the grade's not strong, I can't help myself but think there's an opportunity here for what it is that we can do to help.
What about management and kind of perhaps a gap between management and younger workers? And is there, does that exist perhaps? Is management taking time to catch up because of perhaps a generational gap here, or is that not reality?
Well, we look at the Happiness at Work Index looks by generation, and also splits kind of management with non-management. What we know is that when people leaders, so managers, have the capacity and the willingness to allocate energy to knowing their people. So understanding, again, Todd, what does work-life balance mean to Todd? Or, what career advancement does Todd want? That is very important. Open lines of communication, being transparent. When there are economic stresses in the environment and an employer can very clearly articulate, what it is that they know today, that instills confidence with employees. Creating opportunities for regular check-ins. Internally at ADP Canada, we use technology. We use Standout to be able to provide a quick weekly check-in between people leaders and their teams. But you can even do this with just a quick nudge, right? Whether or not that's using technology or picking up the phone and asking how people are doing, what it is that they need, what support do you require. There are easy ways to be able to drive that up. And I also would tap into things like vacation, encouraging people to take their allotted time, actually disconnecting when they're not in the workplace. Maybe it's providing them mentorship and access to somebody who can support them outside of the workplace. These are all what I think of as easier things for managers to do. I say easier in that it's time and energy and care versus necessarily money. But there are things that people leaders, managers, to your questions, can do to better support their teams, which will drive the team happiness and which will drive, the bottom line. Happy, engaged workers have a direct impact on profitability. Overall,
though, a good news story, I would say, for a change, right?
Yeah, good news story. We're one of the strongest regions and doing well, and it just means, there's an opportunity for improvement. But sometimes we just need to give ourselves a pat on the back and recognize that we're doing okay. Yeah.
And in a sea of bad news, it's almost hard to recognize a good news story these days.
Well, let's take it. I would encourage all of those, not just people leaders, but everybody in workplace impact each other's happiness. So, a little smile goes a long way, doesn't it?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
All right, take care. Heather Haslam, VP of Marketing at ADP Canada. Confusing labels are making it harder to buy Canadian seafood amid trade tensions with the United States. We'll discuss this when we come back. Confusing labels are making it harder to buy Canadian seafood amid trade tensions with the United States. Joining us to discuss all of this is Christina Callegari, Senior Coordinator, Marine Program at the Ecology Action Centre. Christina, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right, so tell us about the issue here, the confusing labels.
Definitely. So any imported fish and seafood that's processed and packaged is required by Canadian law to be labeled where it's last processed, not where it was originally caught or farmed. Because seafood is very complex and has very global supply chains, the place where fish is caught is often not where it is subsequently processed. And so this can make it difficult to know where products are coming from, especially the seafood that you find in the grocery store, which includes things that are canned, smoked, turned into fish sticks, frozen, marinade, those types of things. And there is no requirement for a product that is caught or processed in Canada to be labeled with an origin statement. The government does allow for a voluntary claim to be made on these products. So the two main ones that you're going to see in the grocery store are product of Canada and made in Canada. There's a very distinct difference between the two with the guidance that the government sets for these. So product of Canada means that 98% of the product is Canadian. So for fish, this is going to translate to the fish being caught and processed in Canada, but you have to be wary with the made in Canada claim. This means that the product was only processed in Canada. So it could be seafood that is imported from another country, processed in Canada, and then gets the made in Canada claim. So again, if consumers are looking for Canadian product, they can look to that product of Canada claim, but just be wary that all the other labels could also be imported seafood. So it's important to look out for those.
All right. So what, in a perfect world, what would the labeling look like in your opinion?
Yeah, so for a long time, C-Choice has been asking that our labeling laws require not only where it was last processed, but where the fish was actually caught and farmed. And then in addition to that, we would also like to see the species. There's a lot of seafood fraud and misrepresentation as well in the supply chain, and knowing the species can help guarantee that you know exactly what you're getting. And then in addition to that, we would also like to see how the fish was caught or farmed. There's different types of gear and farming that are used, some more sustainable than others. And so knowing how that product was produced can help consumers make a more sustainable choice.
How engaged are consumers when it comes to all of this? How much attention are they paying to these things that we're talking about?
Over the years, we have found that our campaigns around labeling have gotten a lot of attention. Consumers really want to know where their product is coming from. They've been some of our most popular campaigns. So we've seen that it's definitely something that's top of mind. And as well, these days, we're getting lots of interest from people who want to purchase Canadian but are having trouble to do so.
And yeah, like you said, in the times that we're living in, it's becoming more and more amplified and more important. So, do you think government's listening, or who would make the decisions when it comes to labeling?
Yeah, we hope government is listening. We typically, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency would be the enforcer for these types of labeling laws. Mm-hmm. They're managed by Health Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So those are the departments that would be the decision makers in this case. We find that the mandate for these governments are more towards, or at least for Health Canada and Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they are mandated to care about food safety and health. And so that makes it difficult to have changes in regulations that are focused more on sustainability.
All right, some parting advice before I let you go on people when it comes to this. What quick advice do you give people who want to know more about labeling and seafood and knowing what's Canadian? And because it's a bit confusing, to be honest with you.
It is confusing. So again, look out for the Product of Canada claim when you're at the grocery store for any processed and packaged products. But the other thing that we really encourage folks to do is actually ask questions. So go up to the counter, ask, where is this product from? Even if they don't have the answer, it will help to drive that demand and make sure that companies are aware that consumers want this information. And then the other thing that you can do, if you're able to, is to actually seek out local fishmongers and independent fishers who are selling locally. They're either directly fishing for the product themselves, or they're just one step down from the supply chain, and they'll have a lot more information, and you can be more assured that you're getting what you pay for.
Christina, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, take care. Christina Callegari, Senior Coordinator with the Marine Program at the Ecology Action Centre. Now we've got some time for you. What is on your mind on this Tuesday? Give us a call at 902-405-6000. I got some things that I want to get into, but if you've got some things that you'd like to talk about already, give us a call, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, it's time for you. It's time to take your calls. Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. It's a couple of quick things that I have in my pile, and then I'll open the phone lines. The Nova Scotia government bill that would open the door to fracking for fossil fuels and exploring for uranium is dangerous and should be scrapped, environmental advocates and physicians told a legislature committee this week. The proposed legislation would repeal a law prohibiting uranium exploration to allow for research on the presence of the metal in Nova Scotia and change the Petroleum Resources Act to create the potential for hydraulic fracking of onshore natural gas. When he introduced the bill last month, the Premier said the province needed to be more self-reliant and better able to withstand economic challenges from the United States, including 25% across-the-board tariffs threatened by, of course, Trump. On Monday, members of the public voiced their concerns with the bill to a legislative committee. A Halifax-based physician and a member of the Nova Scotia arm of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, who will join the show, by the way, on Thursday, warned the government not to try to solve one crisis by creating another. So I will ask you the question, should Nova Scotia lift the ban on fracking and exploration of uranium and explore the development of other natural resources as well? What are the economic benefits? Do you believe that there are plenty of economic benefits worth the risk? Do we need to be more self-sufficient? And these resources will be needed for years to come before we make this transition to the green sector. Or are you a hard no, not worth the risk, should focus on renewables? Just a hard no. And do special interest groups, to use that term, have too much influence, or are they playing an important role in all of this and being a safeguard for the environment? That's something that you can weigh in on. Also, of course, on the political scene, Mark Carney and the Liberals absolutely surged like unexpectedly. Nobody expected to see this type of surge. 29-point swing, almost a 30-point swing since late December. And it all started when? Well, it all started when Justin Trudeau announced that he was heading out of office. That's basically when it started. Chrystia Freeland started all of this. And the numbers, depending on what polling firm you look at, are all pretty much in concert. Now, of course, you have people out there who are saying that the pollsters are all in on it together and they're all bought and sold and they all have an agenda and all of that stuff. I don't subscribe to that. I truly don't. I know some pollsters, including Tim Powers, who's on the show regularly, weekly, runs Abacus Data. And I just don't subscribe to the fact that the fix is in when it comes to polls. I really don't. So what are your thoughts on all of this? What are the factors resulting in the stunning turnaround? Is it Trudeau's departure? Is it Mark Carney? Is it worn-out messaging from Pierre Poilievre? I mean, Pierre Poilievre has been trotting out the same message for 2+ years now, and it's worked up until now, and it's no longer working. What has happened with Pierre Poilievre? Is it a Trump factor? Do some of you out there associate Poilievre with Trump? Is that fair? Maybe that's not fair. Maybe that is what the Liberals want you to think. And maybe their messaging is working. Which, if any of these leaders, do you trust? Because there's people out there who don't trust Mark Carney. Obviously. Some people feel as though he's a globalist, that he's a rich elite. He's got things to hide. Again, just trying to balance the conversation out here, folks. And which leader is better equipped to handle Donald Trump? 902-405-6000 or whatever else you want to get into, folks. It's the open hour. You can talk about whatever you like. 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Ed. Hello, Ed.
Good morning, Todd. I'm calling up to agree with Mr. Plord, who you had on yesterday, and appreciate that. His talk about burning wood for the inefficiency of it and the production of carbon, I completely agree with. I would add to that it also, if these pulp companies are doing clear cutting, it adds to soil erosion and water pollution. But the main part of this is I don't know why this government is even entertaining northern pulp coming back into this province in any way, shape, or form. They were a really bad corporate citizen here, and they don't deserve to be back.
Why do you say that?
Well, they polluted in Boat Harbor. They were putting untreated effluent into the water there, polluting the water near the Pictou Landing First Nations. No matter who was near, it was bad. It's the wrong thing to do. Don't get me wrong, but Mr. Rankin, for example, Ian Rankin, described this, and I agree with him, as environmental racism. And then the Northern Pulp, to clean things up, supposedly said, "Oh, we'll build a pipeline to I think it was Northumberland Strait."
Yep, that's right. That's right.
So they were going to dump more pollution in there. It's just a different body of water. It cost when they left. It cost Nova Scotians, $10 million of our taxpayers' dollars that we all pay to clean up their site. And I mean, they shouldn't have been putting that kind of pollution in the soil, and they should have cleaned up their own site and didn't. And then they sued us for $450 million of just a couple of years, 3 or 4 years ago, I think. So why would the Houston government be entertaining a company that's, one, it's a BC company, but it's not really a BC company. It's owned by an Indonesian gentleman. Why would we, after all they've done here, why are we entertaining them coming back in? Why is the government offering them grants, loans, assistance, and wages? What have they done to show that they should be here in any way, shape, or form? Surely there are other industries or other companies that can do this. If we're going to do that, do it better and cleaner, or other companies that might be more appropriate. But Northern Pulp, to me, should be a non-starter, and apparently with this government, it's not.
Well, I guess, Ed, to play devil's advocate, Boat Harbor was the government of the day. Back in the day, they allowed them to do that, so they were only doing what the government allowed them to do. So some would say that the government played a role and is responsible for Boat Harbor because they allowed it. Agree or disagree?
I would agree partially. They're complicit, but it's still Northern Pulp that was doing the pollution.
Yeah.
It's still them that didn't clean up their property. It's still them that sued us, cost us $10 million taxpayers' money almost immediately, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, the reason why they sued they sued us is because the province of Nova Scotia broke a contract with them. They had a contract to operate, and the province of Nova Scotia broke that contract, which cost the company lots of money. So that's
but don't forget they were threatening to shut down at the time anyway. I agree with the other side of things in that the government was complicit and not doing things correctly either.
Right.
That still doesn't make this a good corporate citizen in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I guess I would ask Ed if this Bowater property or the former Beaumersey property on the South Shore by Lunenburg. If this is, in fact, a good parcel of land and the business plan works for a mill, Northern Pulp would probably be as best equipped as any other company in that business of operating, would it not? If you're going to have a pulp mill, they're probably as well equipped as anybody to do it, would they not be?
Well, pulp mills aren't necessarily the best industry for we're a small province with, we don't have vast forests like Quebec or Ontario, but even if they're good within that genre of companies, it doesn't still make them a good company. Corporate culture is very much ingrained there. It's still led by the same person. So after what they've done here, I mean, no matter what the government said, they could have run a clean company no matter what the government allowed them to do, they could have ran a clean company.
Yeah.
But all this gentleman, I can't pronounce his name, but
Right.
Wujay Awa or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He could have run a clean company and still been there. And he did, of course, it was his decision or his board's decision not to do that. And now we're going to make them loans and grants and help pay the wages of whatever number of employees are there. I mean, if we're truly interested in, say, producing energy, shouldn't we be going to small nuclear reactors that are fueled by, say, thorium salt, which is more common than uranium, and it's clean, produces no carbon, and the new reactors are much, much safer than the ones 40 or 50 years ago? It's almost like going backwards. We're taking on a technology that caveman had, i.e. burning wood, and it causes other problems. And even tourism is a tangent here. People don't come here to Nova Scotia, tourists don't, from wherever they come, to see big cities or big industry in that. If they're in the States, they've got that. If they're in Europe, they've got that. They come here for the for the clean seacoast. They come for the rivers. They come for the lakes. They come for a slower and more peaceful way of life, maybe. And we're just hitting the way. We're giving up, I think, tourism may be the biggest industry in this province, or second, I don't know. But we're damaging, too, and it's a tangent to my main point, an industry that's really important here for people that were bad corporate citizens. And this is thanks to the Houston government right now.
Okay, Ed, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. We'll return with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Hello, Jim.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. Do you get your Mark Carney sign on your lawn yet?
No signs on Jim's lawn this year. But I'll say one of my friends told me that one of your callers, I don't know who it was, called in and suggested I've been drinking too much liberal Kool-Aid. I laughed at that because I can tell you that drink is quite popular right now, and I think some of the polls are indicative of that. So I'll keep drinking that liberal Kool-Aid until the election's over.
Okay.
But I wanted to comment on a couple things were mentioned yesterday, I think by yourself and others.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Carney went to Europe, and the reason he didn't go to the United States is not the only reason. He was invited to go there by the United Kingdom and France as well. But one of the statements he made, I felt, says it all about Mark Carney right now and the type of individual we need. He said when asked, did you come here to get support and some help and all this from the UK and the negative things that were coming from the UK, are not negative, but the support that was going that way, as well as France in the beginning. And I think he answered as a prime minister would. And what he said was basically, and I may not be right on, but what he said was, look, Canada doesn't need that kind of support. I'm not here for that. I'm here to discuss Ukraine and other issues of the economy, to spread our economy out through Europe and identify. And he said that Canada doesn't need support, and I'm not here for that because we can support our own sovereignty. We're a nation, we're sovereign, and we'll stick to that. So I think that says a lot about the way he feels about standing up for Canada. And he did say, too, at that conference, that he's not going to sit down with Trump. He may give him a phone call, but he's not going to entertain Trump insofar as the tariffs go, at least until he stops his foolishness about sovereignty. So that was quite interesting from his leadership role. What do you think?
Well, yeah, sure. I think I heard the comments on Trump and saying that Trump needs to knock it off, or that he's not going to meet with him. I think that's good. I like that, but I disagree that we don't need the support of Europe. I think we could use all the support that we can get. Why not, right?
He didn't say we didn't need support from Europe. He said he didn't go specifically for the Prime Minister of Britain, for example, to stand up and say, I stand behind Canada, da-da-da-da, and the King as well, because we're members of the Common.
Well, he would have taken it if he did it.
Well, I think he did. I think behind closed doors, you and I know what goes behind closed. I don't know what goes on, but certainly a lot of stuff goes on behind closed doors. But I don't know why anybody would not think that here is our Prime Minister telling the media, some parts of the media, that, look, we keep answering this question all you want. I'm here because I'm the Prime Minister of Canada. We don't need sometimes they just don't let things go. I don't know how he can make it any clearer. I mean, nobody wants them going down there pounding the desk and yelling and screaming. You're not going to get nothing with that. You got to remember, Prime Minister Carney is a technocrat. The other side, Polyev and the NDP, their leaders are politicians. So it's nice to have a technocrat there for a while. Technically, he's a politician right now for sure because he's Prime Minister and he's going to run in an election. But how many times on your show have people called in and said, I can't stand, I don't trust politicians, I hate them, blah, blah, blah. Yet they're mad at him because he's a politician. I don't get that rationale, that kind of thinking. So I would encourage everybody to go to the store, get some lemonade, and pretend it's liberal lemonade, and let's get on with this election and win this.
All right, Jim. Take care, pal.
Okay, take care.
All right, 902-405-6000. Dan, hi.
Hi there. How you doing today?
I'm well, you?
Pretty good. Calling to mention why Mr. Poilievre's dipped in the polls as much as he has. It's been a one-trick pony most of the way. Yeah. He was trained by Harper to growl, bark, snap. He doesn't seem to have any other tricks in the bag. You know, Dr. Seuss writes all their little blurbs, axe the tax. It's got to rhyme, otherwise we're not going to get it out there because the Canadian people
Dr. Seuss would have come up with better rhymes than they came up with. Come on now, let's not downgrade Dr. Seuss.
No, but I'll tell you.
Pretty pathetic rhymes, I must say. Axe the tax.
Yeah. What I got is, when I'm looking at this, Trudeau, albeit rather lately, stepped out of the way when he became extremely unpopular with the Canadian people. Poilievre has taken what was a runaway lead and has dropped that in a bucket and threw it down the well. So I'm wondering, when will they start talking about, maybe we better put somebody else in front of the Progressive Party or the Conservative Party so that they'll have a chance to gain back what they had lost. Because if they had an alternative right now to Poilievre, people panicked when they saw that, oh my God, we might have Poilievre in there in the middle of this horrible economic situation. And they panicked. And now the polls are balancing out because, the guy has one set of things. Attack, 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 attack. And it's what he was trained to do, and he's extraordinarily good at it. But it doesn't give you a whole lot of avenues of how are you going to deal with somebody. Attacking Trump, that's not going to work, right? Trump will just turn that around and say, "Oh, they're being aggressive with me. I'm going to destroy them." So, anyways, that's pretty much my opinion on the day.
Yeah, Dan, I would say that Poilievre, you have to give him a shot at winning or losing the election. I can't foresee any scenario in which there's an uprising against Poilievre before the election. He's gonna have his chance to win or lose.
Yep. I say, that usually in politics, you take a lead and destroy it. As far as it is right now, of course, the polls could swing.
Yeah, they're tight. It's tight though, right? And anything can change, and you never know what can happen, right? And this is politics, and this is the problem when you have such a lead like Poilievre has had for so long that you can't hold on to it forever. And look, the good news, if you're Pierre Poilievre, I think and you're the Conservatives, you have to say, look, we're in a good position right now, and that it's close, it's tight, and anything can happen, and let's make the best of it. But I think that they desperately need to pivot and to somehow refocus Canadians on something other than axe the tax and Carney's the devil and all the Liberals have run this country into the ground. They have to figure out some different messaging other than that.
Yeah, they have to come out. I haven't seen a single policy, a platform, like stepping forward to say this is what we're going to do to fix what's bad. It's kind of like in the States when Trump was running. It's like, I'm going to fix the economy. I'm going to fix inflation. I'm going to. Yeah. You never hear anything about this is the steps we're going to do to take it. But I don't know if the public these days really is interested in getting into the details.
Well, that's just it, Dan. You're absolutely right. How interested is the public in wanting to know the minutia of the details of how you're going to do anything? I don't think that resonates either. I really don't.
And it's kind of sad because I'd like to hear what they've got to say.
Yeah.
Like I grew up a Stanfield conservative. Like I'm old enough to be that. Right.
Yeah.
But back then, people stood on policies and ran with policies.
Yeah.
But nobody seems to be terribly interested in that now.
Okay, Dan. Thanks for the call, pal.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Justin, then back to the phones. Justin says, when has an opposition party ever shown its cards before an election is called in a biased media who just recently got commitment from the Liberals for more money to the tune of billions? Why would the Conservatives put anything out there that the media would just criticize? No Prime Minister who was unpopular as he's been for so long should have been allowed to prorogue government so that they could run their new guy's campaign. Comes from Justin. 902-405-6000. Tony, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
Doing well, you?
I'm hanging right in there, brother.
Great.
I called about taxes. Yesterday, you had the counselors on, and two things really got me. One is one of the counselors was asked, well, where do you stand right now? And very nonchalantly said, well, we stand at 8%. Well, we were talking 7.6 before all this started. Now we're up to 8%. So what's it going to be? We don't know. 2 more weeks we'll know. And the other thing that I'm curious about, and I mean this, I don't know the answer to this question, and I'm very curious. I get an assessment, and it says, this is how much my house is worth, this is what my taxes are going to be based on, and this is what my taxes are going to be. But I don't see that 3% anywhere. If I don't have a house, if I don't own a property, do I pay the 3%?
Okay.
That's my question to the people. I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to know if everybody pays tax in the municipality for that 3% tax, or only are we the homeowners paying that tax? Or are we the only ones that pollute and paying that tax? So that's that question. The next thing I want to talk about real quick, and I hope I don't go too long, is the Prime Minister, in my opinion, yesterday, the Prime Minister-elect, in my opinion, yesterday, made a big mistake. He keeps poking at Trump and telling him he's not moving, he's not doing this, and he's not doing that, and then telling the world that Canada can stand alone. He better watch his mouth. He better watch his mouth. I've told you this before. I'm going to tell you and the people again. Trump listens to what he wants to listen to, and he hears what he wants to hear. If he really wants to stir the pot with this guy, when your economy, the Canadian economy, is nowhere near what the American economy can stand, go ahead. Keep banging your sword on the ground. See how that works out for you. The other thing is, his wife is a quote from a British newspaper before they came home, an eco warrior. And she really is an environmentalist, mm-hmm. And she actively participates in policy dialogues on carbon taxes and such, and also income inequality. Yesterday, I listened to his news conference as he was leaving his trip out of Europe, and the very last thing he was asked what's going to happen with the carbon tax? He says, well, it's gone. And the lady that was asking says, it's gone completely. Well, no, not exactly. I took it off the retailers to the public. So the public on the 1st of April will not be paying a carbon tax. And, of course, then she followed it up with, well, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. He said, well, I just eliminated that part of the law. And so there you go now. You got a Prime Minister writing executive orders. Is this a Trump-like Prime Minister? Is he going to start writing executive orders? I'm interested in seeing that. And last thing, yeah. Todd, I promise you. Yeah. Dr. Carney himself has warned the Canadians Canada is globally laggard as climate-related financial policy. Mm-hmm. This was a letter sent to him. In answer to a letter sent to him by 57 different organizations and individuals concerning Canada's policy. Well, I'm going to ask two things then. The 3% goes into the general fund at the municipal level, dedicated to some phony activity that we can't get what's been done with the money. And the carbon tax, which was almost $6 billion last year, goes into the general fund. Well, what has the general fund done to improve the atmosphere, the environment? What has it done? And those are my two questions. And believe me, I'm not shooting at Carney. I don't care who wins the election. I really don't, because it doesn't make any difference to me one way or the other. I don't have a vote, but I want to know where my tax money's going.
Well, okay, you said I think you said 2% on. It's 3% for Halifax, is it not? It's not. It's 3%, not 2%.
That's what I said. 3%.
Oh, 3%. Okay.
2%.
Yeah. So where that money's going? That money is supposed to go directly into environmental funds, and God knows where that money goes. And I agree with you. Much more transparency, and I'm dubious as you are, and as skeptical as anybody about that whole deal. Federally, I don't know that the carbon tax was ever promised to go into fighting climate change, because we're told that it was all given back to us anyway through rebates. Were we not?
Yeah, well, that's what they told us. But as you well know, we're nowhere near that. So
yeah. So
I mean, you're a homeowner. I don't have to tell you what you got back. You didn't get anywhere. You may have gotten back 20% or 22%, depending, but you didn't get anything back. I'm concerned. 0.1%. Yeah. Canada has reduced its environmental impact, its footprint, over 11 years, Todd.
Yeah.
11 years.
Yeah. I hear you.
Now, Carney, keep in mind one thing. With this executive order he signed, the day after he calls it that he wins the election, which by the way, I believe he will win.
Yeah.
I do believe he will win.
Yeah.
That's just my guess. He can write or he can stand up and say, well, we tried it and it didn't work, so we're going to have to go back to it. One last thing, keep in mind, producer, refiner, wholesaler, retailer, consumer. That's how his tax works, what he is proposing. He even said it at the end of the interview yesterday. He said, you may have to pay more taxes.
Yeah.
Or he said the producer may have to pay more taxes.
Right.
Well, if the producer pays more taxes, you can be damn sure when it gets to consumer, you're going to be paying more taxes.
Okay, Tony, appreciate the call, pal.
Have a great day. Thank you for the time.
All right, take care. You got it, 902-405-6000. Hello, Jim.
Hey, Todd.
Hi
How
there.
are you?
I'm well. You?
Good. Just following up on a couple of things that you've been talking about. First of all, the biomass, burning the biomass.
Yeah.
And I worked in this area quite a bit. There is another alternative, and that is agroforestry, where right now there's about 40,000. It's either hectares or acres. I don't have the right number in front of me, but 40,000 hectares of agricultural land that was in production as late as the 1970s, which is now out of production. And that land would be perfectly suitable to grow hybrid poplars or hybrid willows, which actually grow as a shrub, and they grow very, very quickly. I was involved in some work, and we were growing trees that were in the order of 25 feet tall, or shrubs 25 feet tall in just 2 years. And they would be ground up and pelletized, right? So the event in both the Nova Scotia Department of Agriculture and I think UCCB did a fair amount of research in this. The work is all there. And basically, you just ask farmers, you say, okay, if you got some land, you can put it in production, you grow these shrubs, you grind it up, you pelletize it, it's trucked to the biomass plant. So, and there's a whole argument about is biomass carbon neutral or not. That's beyond my pay grade. But at the end of the day, there's lots of sources. Nova Scotia has a bit of a tropical climate. We can grow these shrubs very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And we can also use, biosolids on them as nutrients. They use hybrid willows and PEI along all their streams to soak up the nutrients that are running off the potato fields before they get into the rivers that have trout habitat and stuff. So anyway, I'd like to see somebody follow that up. I'll talk about fracking.
Okay.
The Wheeler report that was done, I'm going to say I've been retired for 10 years. So let's say that Wheeler report was done for, say, 12 years ago. done for the Department of Energy, he highlighted how fracking can be done in Nova Scotia. And basically, I heard my friend Dr. Larry Hughes on your program a couple of weeks ago, and he actually used the word cowboy with respect to frackers. Well, the frackers in the States screwed up the whole industry because there are a bunch of cowboys that actually caused a lot of terrible work and caused a lot of pollution and affected aquifers and so on. There's a lot of fracking done in Alberta. It doesn't have the same environmental impact when it's done in a properly regulated environment. Mm-hmm. So the irony of it now is there's a 10-inch diameter pipeline that is bringing natural gas to both Tufts Cove and our universities and our hospitals and a great pile of our infrastructure in downtown Halifax. That gas is all coming from Pennsylvania, which is frack gas. Mm. So if people are that opposed to fracking, it's okay to frack in their backyard, but not in our backyard.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, the technology is out there. It can be done safely. Mm-hmm. I don't think it will ever be done because of the public acceptance and backlash against it. But I think that Wheeler report should be revisited. Now, to get down to the mining thing, the hard rock mining and this uranium aspect, when I was a young guy, about 20 years old, 22 years old, I guess I got a job at the Department of Environment. I worked with great people, and we worked on that uranium moratorium. And I can tell you those people at that time were as brilliant or more brilliant than anybody that could possibly be in government right now. They were dedicated to finding out what are the risks of uranium mining, and they decided that the risks were much too high. Nothing's changed, despite of what the mining industry is telling you. And for example, one thing that has changed, though, is our frequency of hurricanes. And Nova Scotia, little stat, we get 3 hurricanes a decade that make landfall here. So they either manifest themselves as rain, wind, or waned in rain. And Fiona had the added blessing of giving us a storm surge, right? Mm. So back in 1972, Hurricane Beth dropped 7 inches of rain in 1 hour on Halifax International Airport, 14 inches of rain on Sable Island, right, in 1 hour. Mm-hmm. That will wash out any tailings dam. It will wash out anything. So that is the frequency of an extremely severe hurricane. Now, there's one mining development that was planning a coal mine with the tailings near Cameron Settlement in Guysborough County, and their tailings pond was going to be the size of Lake Veinotte. And I mean, so you can imagine going across the park flow and you look down to those canoe clubs. That's how big, how in visual size. So when you get the rain come down on that area, the difference is Lake Veinotte is 5 meters deep. Their tailings pond was going to be 30 meters deep.
Whoa! Yeah.
Okay. So these things they're out of scale. Nova Scotia just, quite frankly, does not have the real estate for hard rock mining. Other than, I am a supporter of quarries. I think we should have been developing quarries and exporting rock to the United States before they've turned such a nasty neighbor, because we could load there's that Mariana Minerals actually as we go across the Canso Causeway, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, so we do know how to quarry. It's safe, but, in Nova Scotia, you're never more than 50 kilometers from the ocean if you're in the dead center of the province. So somehow that rainfall and things have to get to the proximities, and we just don't have the real estate for it. I talked about the tailings pond design, and I'm a professional engineer. Right now, I don't know of any tools that engineers can use to actually predict the magnitude of the rainfalls we're going to have, because they're off the scale. The 1 in 100-year storm, which the work that I did when I was a youngster, I mean, we could rely on a 1 in 100-year storm, that data being significant, but the intensity and frequency of hurricanes, it's a non-starter for these big, I'm going to call them toxic mineral mines, right? That the design people just don't have the information to design the tailings ponds to hold back the water in a 14-inch rainfall, which I don't know if a lot of your listeners will remember, and you may if you had been around Dartmouth. I think you're a St. John guy, though, or New Brunswick. Yeah. But they washed out Hawthorne Street. All of downtown Dartmouth is gone, right? It drained Lake Veinotte because it washed out all the streets, all the way down to where the old skate factory was and all those things. washed it all out. And, so we've had Hurricane Hortense, which hit Sheet Harbor and then also hit the Highlands Park. But anyway, long and short of it is fracking, I'm in favor of it. It'll never happen. Biomass, we can use biomass effectively, and we should be using it. It would be a great income to farmers to support their income.
Mm-hmm.
Hard rock mining with these guys, it needs to be looked at, but I think we could do other economic things like quarries and things like that.
Okay, Jim, got a boogie. Thanks for the call, pal.
Yeah, okay, man.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Paul, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Pretty good. I want to talk about Mr. Carney and perhaps his conflict of interest in regards to him sandbagging Canada on industrial development. As I've talked about with LNG export plants, the United States is a leader of that. The Trudeau government, who apparently was having Mark Carney as an advisor for the last 5 years, told the German chancellor that there was no business case for that. But curiously, Brookfield Asset Management is part owner of one of the new LNG plants in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Basically was Mark Carney whispering into the ear that there was no business case in Canada while enriching his own company. And by the way, the partners on that, the majority partner on that particular LNG plant, Cove Point in Maryland, is the most successful private equity investor in the world, and that's Warren Buffett with Berkshire Hathaway. Mark Carney's companies are involved with a company called Cheniere Energy, which has the world's largest LNG plant. So if we want to have independence from the United States, we have to have a prime minister that isn't sandbagging, and complaining about the opposition not going for a security clearance. What type of security clearance did Mark Carney have while he was sandbagging us in the interest of his company?
Well, you're obviously not voting for Mark Carney, and I take your point. You don't trust the guy. It's pretty evident, right? You don't trust Mark Carney or his intentions.
Well, the thing about it is that there's one thing that he'll say to people out west about let's open up pipelines, and then he goes into Quebec and saying, "No, I'll be against pipelines." It's the old saying, basically rules for me or rules for thee and not for me.
Yeah, it wouldn't be certainly not. I'm not defending him, but he's certainly not the only politician who's ever said one thing in one part of the country and another part and another message in another part of the country. That's an old tactic that they've all used, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. But you know what? How do you defend yourself as holding the Canadian flag when your interests are basically with the United States or other places?
Well, he's got some interest, obviously, with his company. Some interest in and look, the whole Brookfield story. I think that is definitely got some merit to it, and I think should be explored and considered. But at the end of the day, it's not resonating with people when it comes to whether they care or not. At least not according to polling. Why do you think that people, Canadians generally, aren't concerned to the level or aren't concerned as you are with these issues? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that people are not as engaged in regards to this as I am. The thing is that I'd rather that there was LNG plants or fracking or the mill running or whatever, right? But people get into these false narratives and basically are sold a good, bill of goods. Yeah. That turns out to be false. Well, he was over there with Macron, right?
Yeah.
He should have asked if we could have gotten in line to sell them LNG if we ever had a plant on the East Coast, because Macron just signed a deal with Qatar for a lot of LNG.
Yeah.
And it's funny there's no business case. Well, there seemed to be a business case in a nation that's the most highly nuclear powered nation in the world, with 70% of their electricity coming from nuclear power.
Well, this is why the Premier of Nova Scotia is saying that they wanted to develop these resources because Tim Houston believes there's certainly a business case for it, right?
Well, he does, but the thing is that again, a population that, for example, with the person that was on basically slandering Northern Pulp, right?
Yeah.
Everything was treated going out of that out into Boat Harbor. Everything. It wasn't untreated effluent, and in fact, the definition of effluent is that it's treated. Mm-hmm. We had a third-party monitoring body with the same biology.
Well, let me ask you this question. Yes, I agree it was effluent. It was treated to a certain degree, but would you want it flowing into a body of water in which you live by?
I live in New Glasgow.
Okay.
The mill's been a part of my life for most.
You're not suggesting that they didn't decimate Boat Harbor, are you? Are you suggesting that?
No, I'm not suggesting that. But here's the thing: we get the xenophobic and racism in regards to the origin of the last company was there. Those evil Indonesians. That's all we hear around here. But you see, from the start of the company until when they took it over in 2010, it was all Anglo-Saxon American companies, Scott, Blue Wolf Capital, Kimberly-Clark, Nia Paper. They're all Americans. And we never heard anything as far as, those dirty Americans are screwing up our environment here. And here's the thing. The deal, which was made in regards to Boat Harbor, was a deal that was made with Scott. And basically, the province signed on the dotted line to take care of the effluent treatment coming out of that plant. That's the sin of our politicians, not the sin of the company. Yeah. The company, if the company's offered that to do that, and
I mentioned that to the caller or to the guest.
Absolutely, you did. Yeah. And I'm not criticizing for that to you, but I mean, Scott Paper or Northern Pulp, basically, we wouldn't have had a causeway going to Pictou because that was a containment dam for water for that plant. People, the amount of growth that happened in Glasgow with Michelin and Northern Pulp in the 60s was that our entire west side became a subdivision instead of a farmer's field.
Right.
Okay.
Listen, we're just out of time. Hopefully you get out what you wanted to say. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. All right, take care. Thanks for the calls, everybody. The Science Files with Rob Thacker when we come back. All right, it's time for the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, 902-405-6000. That is the way to get in on the action. Again, 902-405-6000. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, if you've got a question or two, science-related, of course, 902-405-6000. So I actually watched the launch to recapture the astronauts.
Oh yeah, they're coming down. Aren't they?
Yeah,
it's a long trip though.
Yeah, so. but an impressive launch, really. Elon Musk company. I mean, look, he gets a lot of negative publicity with Tesla, but that is quite a company he's built, is it not?
So this is one of the areas in which I will give Elon Musk some credit. So people talk about all of the issues with Tesla, but with SpaceX, that is, to a large extent, his vision of what reusable rocketry would look like. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people say, okay, people are talking about it before, but people need to remember that when he started trying to put SpaceX together, most people in the industry were saying, you're crazy, just do single launch, drive the price down of that, and then you'll be good. And he was like absolutely sure in his head that this could be done. And admittedly, he couldn't do it without a lot of other people. Like the technical side of it, let's obviously face it, that's not Elon Musk. But the fact of the matter is the vision was his. And
Right.
I think that's an honest evaluation.
And vision often is as important as the technology, right?
Yeah, I mean, people also point out, if you look at SpaceX, a lot of the key initial players, they've all gone, right? So you can say that Elon Musk, and again, won't surprise anyone, he does have a habit of pissing people off and people leaving.
Yeah.
Right? So he's not good at holding on to people in the long run.
Yeah.
That is clear. But nonetheless, he was able to get a bunch of people together to think about all of the rocket design, and it's worked out.
Yeah. And they were the two astronauts who are now on their way back to Earth. I'm not sure if they've arrived completely yet or not, but they were only expected to be there for a couple of days, from what I gather.
8 days.
They were there for months.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's that must be tough to deal with for them, because I'm sure that they had plans.
Yeah.
And so in this particular case, I really, I mean, I know it's very nuts and bolts, but I truly wonder what the compensation situation was for them. And so this can't have been easy, because all of the holidays that they would normally have been taken, those were obviously suspended. So there must be some kind of compensation for them, I would think, right? But no, I'm sure that they are glad to be on their way home.
How interwoven is SpaceX and NASA at this point?
That's a tricky one, right? And so SpaceX will definitely admit that what they've done has been made possible by NASA, right? They've had a lot of help from NASA along the way. And so nowadays, though, I think it's fair to say, because they have their own design unit, right? And although they still do have a relationship with NASA, there is an awful lot of expertise on board at SpaceX, right? So the relationship is not like it was when they were going through their prototyping early on and developing. I think they're actually fairly independent now.
Okay. 902-405-6000, that is the way to get a hold of us. Alexander's done just that. Hello, Alex.
Hi, good afternoon, Todd, and good afternoon, Dr. Thacker.
Hello to you.
Quick question about the planet Saturn. I was just reading an article about Saturn, and apparently 128 new moons have been discovered for a total of 274. What constitutes a moon? Is it size? Is it a certain size, and you can call something that's orbiting your planet a moon?
So astronomically, I'm not sure what the precise definition. I mean, we've really, over a period of time, it's come to basically mean any kind of object that is a satellite around a planet, right? And so with Saturn's really tricky, because obviously it has all of this material that's in the rings. And so there's an awful lot of stuff in the rings, and you could sort of say, well, does it have millions of moons, in fact? And so there's a tricky definition there. I'm not sure that I've heard of a ratio being put in place, because if you look at Mars's moons, Phobos and Deimos, those are both very small captured asteroids. They're tiny compared to our moon. So at the end of the day, it's, as far as I know, and I really should know what the IAU definition is, but I haven't seen it recently, is it's literally something in orbit around a planet.
So could something man-made be considered a moon?
Conceivably. That's no moon. Couldn't resist, sorry.
Like the space station, if the space station were to be a certain size, is that a moon if it were to stay there for 100 years or so?
So I'm pretty sure that there is a rider on it being naturally occurring, right? So that's no moon. It probably is apt in this case that you would have to have something that's naturally occurring.
Okay, thanks so much.
No problem.
Okay, thanks. Take care. 902-405-6000. That it's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Interesting question, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the issues with the giant planets, that as you go down in mass, you will start finding a lot more moons, in quotes, around these objects. I mean, it would be interesting to know whether people were prepared to put a mass ratio limit, like something that was so much smaller wouldn't be considered a moon. But then, like I said, Phobos and Deimos are very tiny objects compared to the size of our own moon. So there's already precedence for things that are quite small.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. So when it comes to the International Space Station and the work that's done on there, what is new, or what's the curriculum on a day-to-day basis? What guides them? as to what to do?
So there are obviously a lot of experiments going on at the ISS on any one time. Most of the experiments that happen on there are really focused on what you can do in microgravity environments.
In what?
Microgravity.
Okay.
Right? So very, very low gravity, close to zero gravity.
Yeah.
I mean, as we all know, there's essentially no gravity on the ISS. I mean, there's a tiny little bit of gravity that's from the ISS itself, but otherwise, no, there's no gravity. And so there's a lot of stuff that's done that's related to human health as well, right? So obviously, when you have any kind of astronauts up in a low gravity environment, there's lots and lots of experience. I mean, people might think, well, haven't we done everything we can? And the answer is no. Yeah. The human body is such an amazing system that no one would have expected that viruses would present differently in low gravity. And so if you have any kind of dormant virus in your cells and you go to the space station, there is a certain risk that those may activate again. And so that can be sort of for the more common things like cold sores and so on, that happens, to the more unpleasant things like potentially shingles and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff to learn about what happens to bodies in no gravity. And the other thing is that, boy, bodies weren't designed to be in zero gravity, right? They all evolved in gravitational situations. So I still think it's remarkable at all that we actually can survive in it.
Yeah. Okay. 902-405-6000. Carl, hello.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you guys doing today?
We're well.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I've been looking at these photos of this gravitational hole in the Indian Ocean. I'm sure you've probably seen this. It changes all the time, but have you seen photos of this thing?
No. What's this about?
Yeah, it's like a high gravity area in the Indian Ocean, and literally it just looks like a hole in the middle of the ocean, and water's just pouring down from all sides like a waterfall.
Okay. So I'm looking at this, and I think this is a hoax. I'm really sorry. Right. So
is it really?
Yeah, this literally doesn't make sense to me. So you can have high gravity regions on the Earth. That's known. But when we talk about high gravity regions, we're talking about things that happen because of a higher local density in rock. So you can have that if you had a really, really big asteroid that hit the Earth a long time ago and that was a lot of nickel in that, then you could have a higher gravity region. But this idea that there's this hole that stuff's just floating down, that doesn't make sense to me at all, right? So I have I'm literally just Googled it because I quickly didn't have any sort of like knowledge of what this was about. But anytime you see a picture of where there's water flowing down, right, that's probably not accurate. Now, you could have something where there is a sort of like, I don't know, there's like a local dip in sea level. That's possible, right? But overall, this idea that suddenly there's this like giant hole where stuff is just flowing down, that just doesn't make sense. That's not going to happen physically.
Yeah, because they have like tons and tons of pictures of it, and it changes all the time. It never looks the same. And some of them are just extraordinary photos. I don't know, but you say it's fake.
Well, I mean, the pictures that I saw literally typing it into Google were definitely fake, right? But the actual pictures from a professional assessment of it and a geographic assessment of it, I'd have to see those.
Okay. Well, thanks for your input.
No problem.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. If you've got a question or two, or if you'd like to pick Rob's brain, give us a call. 902-405-6000. The Science Files with Rob Thacker returns when we come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. If you'd like to chat with Rob, give us a call at 902-405-6000, just like that. Simple as that. 902-405-6000. While we await some calls, Rob...
Do you just want to finish off on the...
Yeah, sure.
So this gravity hole, I mean, to give Carl... sort of like his due. So this is a real thing, but the area that it's over is really, really huge. It's called the Indian Ocean Geoloid Low. It has a name. And so people sort of say the Earth is a little bit like a lumpy potato. There are bits of it that are denser than others and so on. So this is a very, very big area. And the ocean level does go down by about 300 feet, but that's over 1 million square miles, right? So this is something that if you were sailing through it, you literally wouldn't know it was there. right? Unless you were doing some kind of survey, and that was how they found it in the first place. So what I want everyone to be aware of is if you take this idea and then you then put a sort of like slightly misleading picture on it, which is what I found as soon as I did a search on Google, then that's going to make you think that you've got this hole in the ocean that stuff is slowing down on. And that's not what it's about. It's literally an area where there's more gravity, and so the sea level gets lower over a very, very large area.
All right, somebody just sent me an email. Dan says, I think the caller was referring to Indian Ocean geoid low.
That's what I just said.
That's what you just said. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
902-405-6000. Here's another email. I'll read a bit of it. It says, the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis proposes that extraterrestrial object impact around 12,900 years ago triggered the Younger Dryas cooling period. Mega something extinctions and changes in human culture. Just wondering if this has been debunked or accepted. Does that make sense to you, that email?
Not a geologist, so I'm not going to put my neck out on this one. I've certainly heard about it. So the main reason is whenever you have a big impact event, then if you throw enough material up into the atmosphere, you can get the equivalent of what's called, I mean, it's given a crazy name, but the nuclear winter scenario, where you just basically block out the sun, right? And so that kind of idea, there's a similar but lower level effect that goes on with really big volcanoes as well, right? So like Pinatubo is actually used as a way to benchmark whether a climate model works or not, because we know what happened to the atmosphere after that. So I've heard about this as an idea, but honestly, you'd have to find a geologist or someone and speak to them on it.
Yeah. How many active volcanoes are in the world?
There's a lot. And so there's a lot that are actively monitored, but the hard thing is the stuff that's down on the seafloor.
Right.
Right. And so while there is, again, a lot of monitoring that's done on the seafloor, there's still a lot of things down there that we don't really have active monitoring of.
How does the volcanic action on the seafloor differ from outside of that world? Or does it?
I'm not necessarily sure that there is. Well, there will be sort of like differences in the plumes themselves, because obviously you've got like this cooling layer. Yeah. But in terms of the processes by which we see this and magma coming through in faults and things, I think it's basically the same kind of process. But yes, the release of it is going to be different. And so I would, although, I mean, all of that said, I mean, I was about to say, I wonder what the impact would be on what we call pyroclastic flows, where you get lots of dust all mixed together that rolls down at really high speeds. But we've got evidence of those happening in the ocean as well.
Yeah, for sure, and it's amazing how much of a disruption atmospherically can be caused by one of these eruptions.
Oh, for sure. I mean, seriously, one of the things to remember is that human lifespans and human civilization lifespan is still pretty short compared to geological timescales. Mm-hmm. So we've not had any kind of supervolcano events happen in that particular period. I mean, those happen on scales of, I can't remember if it's tens of millions or hundreds of millions of years between outbursts, but there will be another one of those eventually, right? But who knows when?
Iceland was one of the last ones that I can remember that had disruption to air traffic.
Oh yeah, so I mean, but that's not what I would call a supervolcano. Right. That's still something that's on a modest scale. Yeah. So I mean, we can go back to like Krakatoa was the thing that people will probably remember. That's how many, 150 years ago or something like that, 1870s. And so that was a big explosion, but compared to supervolcanoes, that's still not on the map.
Right. Okay. Anything in Canada that's active?
No, not on that scale that I'm aware of. So I mean, the last thing. Oh, what it is? It's the I'm trying to remember. So Yellowstone, right? People talk about that and the danger potentially there based upon a hypothesis. But I think most people think, okay, there's a risk, but we're still talking like, I don't know, hundreds of millions of years down the line.
Right. Interesting. 902-405-6000. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. In the meantime, I'll ask you some questions about this story. And sent it along, Science Daily, how the brain uses building blocks to navigate social interactions. And really, it's amazing that everything that we do, Rob, to some degree, has been built upon the shoulders of something else, right? Nothing is really unique in a way, is it?
So I think that's very true. And if you think about what you're using when you learn, you're building little neural connections in your brain that correspond to certain situations. right? And so what this particular study has done it broke down a situation where you were playing in a game with a partner against two other people. And what they used imaging of the brain to see which parts of your brains were stimulated at certain points in the game, right? And so what they were trying to find out is, do you have a system of keeping track of what you are doing, what your partner is doing, and what the two other people are doing? Or do you put together like a timeline of interactions and just work with that? And it turns out you do both, right? And so the brain, over a period of time of interacting with other people in both single situations and group situations, builds up certain mental shortcuts for understanding what's going on in a situation. And so the example that they give is that you literally build a shortcut of, are me and my teammate ahead or behind? Right? Now, that's completely logical and completely sensible, and everyone will understand that. But that's a simple way of taking a situation of four agents interacting and then breaking it down into something that you can work with. It's a simple heuristic, as they call them. And so they've done this, and they have more complex heuristics and so on. And so over a period of time, as you're in more social situations and working groups and so on, you will develop more skills, right? Or have more intellectual shortcuts or heuristics, as they call them. And so this is sort of speaks to the value of experience and being in different social situations when it comes to dealing with these kind of issues.
Yeah, and then of course you incorporate into the whole formula emotions and all of that matters, and confidence and self-esteem and what people believe they can learn, and that's an interesting component to this.
So let's just pull something in. I mean, this was based on a relatively simplistic game, but if you go and look at poker, for example, I think that is one of the best examples where having experiences of playing different players, different table situations, and so on, different card situations, is really going to build your skills. Now, if you don't learn from them, admittedly, you're not going to get a better player, and that might be one of the big factors in dividing good players versus bad players. But you can certainly imagine the more situations you're in, the more you're able to read what might possibly be going on. That ultimately is going to be a help down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. But confidence is such a factor, and it's hard to determine where confidence even comes from, really, isn't it?
I would love to be able to speak carefully about that, but off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure how psychologists would measure confidence. I mean, there's obviously self-belief is a big part of that, right? And so do you believe that you're accurate all the time?
And where does that come from, that self-belief, right?
That probably comes from ego, would be my guess. But I don't know. Again, these are technical terms for psychologists, so that they have particular viewpoints on this. So I don't want to get into that because I'm not a psychologist. But I mean, certainly you can have inappropriate self-confidence.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure. I mean, there's known studies of if you know a little bit on something and you're kind of confident about the little bit that you know, you'll be prepared to talk about it more because you don't know the things you don't know.
Sure.
Right? And so that is essentially, I mean, it's more complicated, but essentially that's the idea of the so-called Dunning-Kruger argument, that you'll be more prepared to talk about something when you just know a little bit about it, and I'm in danger of getting into that territory right now, than if you actually had studied it for a long time and you know all of the subtleties and nuances, and then you can talk about those, and all of those will have a tendency to make the simple things more complex than they actually look to be.
Interesting. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. Go to Mobile Line Tree if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Bobby's giving us a buzz. Hello, Bobby.
Good day, gentlemen. My question is, what kind of impact does glacial rebound have on sea level rise?
It can actually be fairly significant, right? So again, I'm not a geologist, but I have studied a little bit about this. And so in certain geolocales, if you have this long period of time in which the glacier is over the area and pushing it down, then you can have sort of like a small additional increase on sea level rise that's created associated with some kind of rebounding, whether in this case it would have to be going down as the situation post the glacier being over it, but also you can have things going up, and you can have seesaw effects where one piece goes up and another piece goes down and so on. So yes, it can have an impact, but in general, in terms of the other things contributing to sea level rise, it's much more local, right, rather than being something that's felt globally as opposed to sort of like increase in water levels.
Oh, interesting. So, and like when the glaciers were formed over like northern Canada, let's say, were they distributed evenly, or was it more kind of in one spot than the other?
So I don't want to say because I'm not a geologist, right? So I'm sure someone who's an expert could give you a straight up answer on this. Obviously, the ice sheet is going to be different thicknesses in different places, right? But in terms of what that actually does to the mantle and how that impacts the mantle, you'd have to get a geologist to give you a direct take on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks for the call. Take care at 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz. Rob Thacker, astrophysicist, ready to take your call. Dustin's giving us a call. Hi, Dustin.
Hey, how's it going today, Todd?
It's going well. You?
Oh, not so bad.
Great.
Listen, I just had a question for your guest today.
Sure.
Had to do with the blood moon that was in the sky there probably about a week ago. I just had a question as to the blue light that gets scattered during the event.
The blue light that gets scattered in the event. So you're talking about the red comes from light going through our atmosphere, so it gets reddened by that. So you'll have this sort of like red impact. But the blue light itself, I mean, there's a couple of things that's presumably going on there. I mean, in general, moonlight is bluish, right? So that's one of the inherent natures of the scattered light that comes from the moon. It's going to have a blue tint to it. So in fact, one of the real challenges of doing astronomy when you have a bright full moon is that not only do you have a lot of light from the moon, it's got a very bluish tint to it. And so that will then actually react with the atmosphere, the atoms in the atmosphere, and will be quite strongly scattered. So we often say that the sky will ring with blue light.
Interesting. So I guess my question really pertains to just trying to understand. So you have the second law of thermodynamics, correct? Is that playing a role in this at all?
I wouldn't say it wouldn't be the first thing I would talk about in the context of an eclipse, right? So thermodynamics and movement of heat is a distinctly different phenomenon. I mean, this is essentially, you could call it a combination of gravity and then optics, right? That's the main thing that you've got going on here. And so for something, I mean, I was trying to think if there's any way I could bring in a thermodynamic argument on this, and I'm struggling to do that. So, yeah.
The way I was framing the question, I suppose, maybe a little bit abstract, because I'm trying to understand, like I say, what happens to that blue light, because our atmosphere is made up of all kinds of different particles, and so when the light's going through it, it's refracting the blue, but I just don't understand, because it's saying that the light just kind of scatters in the atmosphere.
So here's how to think about it. So when the light goes through the atmosphere, right, the stuff that's easily scattered is going to be the blue, right? And so then the stuff that isn't easily scattered is going to be the longer wavelength stuff. And so that's going to be the stuff that passes through. And so then when you're on the other side of the Earth and on the moon, you'll see that kind of reddish glow around the Earth. I mean, I would love, quite frankly, that's something I would really love to do. I would love to be on the moon during a lunar eclipse. Right, from the Earth. That would be something to see. I mean, it's pretty amazing to see the moon in front of the sun. Now, obviously, the Earth is going to be bigger than the sun, so you're going to go into complete darkness for a while, and then just as you come through the edge, you'll get sort of like that sudden redness associated with the light coming through the atmosphere. But it's going to be a very different overall feeling. It's like a little bit like a lunar eclipse takes... is it 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that? Whereas a total eclipse of the sun is like 3 minutes and you're done. Right.
Sure.
So it's going to be a very different experience from that perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess it's leaving me with more questions than answers, but I find it a very interesting topic. I just thought I'd get your take on it.
It's not really about sort of like, because we have a strong tendency to associate temperature and heat with color. right? Everyone knows why we do that, because we grow up with fire, and that's one of the ways that we actually come to learn about things. Very hot things glow and so on. But in this case, you're seeing disparate phenomena that are not really associated with that.
Interesting. Well, thank you for your time, fellas.
No problem.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. I wanted to go back to the brain and the building blocks thing because it's interesting. From what I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but we only use a very small percent of our brain. Is that correct, Rob?
I think there's a lot of debate over that. So, I mean, part of that is related to we don't particularly understand the brain very well.
Yeah.
Right? Now, obviously, we have lots and lots of scans of the brains now compared to what we had 20 years ago. But that concept or idea came from a long time ago. And I'm pretty sure that most people don't agree with it now who work in neuroanalysis. Yeah.
Okay, so what percent?
I can't get, again, because I'm not an expert on that. But I've certainly heard people say that we actually use a lot more of the brain.
Okay. Do you believe that, or do you feel as though, or is there any science to indicate that we can use our brain to do things like move objects or that type of thing? Do we have that ability to do that type of thing without actually using our body or anything physically to move it?
Can you move things with the power of your brain?
Yeah.
No.
Impossible?
Telekinesis?
Is that the term?
Yeah, so things like that and sort of like mind reading and so on, telepathy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, right? This stuff has been studied so much that if anyone found anything that actually worked, oh my goodness, would people be on that in a heartbeat? But there's just really no evidence for it, and people spend a lot of money, and now to the point where people won't get money for it now because it's just not taken seriously anymore.
All right, what about kind of the people who are cerebral, or they seem to have another sense or whatever it is, that they can sense things are happening or whatever? Do you believe in that, or is that?
So that's trickier, right? Because it's very, very context dependent, right? So you'll get people who have a lot of experience, and so let's use politics as an example, right? And they've seen a lot of things. They know a lot of people, and they actually have a good kind of intuition for what an outcome in a certain situation is going to be. And so those kind of people, they'll just say, oh, I can see what's coming. Just wait, the person's going to do this, right? And that kind of thing is real. Right, that's just built on levels of experience, but it's also, and I think this is important to say, there is also a post-event effect, right? And I will use Don Cherry as a good example, right? Don Cherry is someone who is known for making predictions all the time. When do you hear about Don's predictions being wrong?
Never.
You don't.
Never.
Right? But when you hear about Don's predictions being right all the time, right? So there is this tendency that if you do that kind of post-prediction review and you literally don't point out when you were wrong, then people will presume that you're right because you only talk about the time that you're right. So you have to be really careful about that, right? So if you have people who are very charismatic and say, oh, I predicted that, and then they only ever say, I predicted that when they did predict it, you've got to remember that you should really be counting up all the times they predicted something and they didn't get it right.
How about ESP? Do you believe in that?
No.
Tell me why.
I don't, because, again, people have done a lot of research and people have been trying to find something. I mean, this is the thing. A lot of people presume scientists come at things with a negative perspective. And no, as a scientist, you come at it from the perspective of you want to be able to see what the experiment tells you, right? And there's a tiny number of studies where there are unusual results, right? It's a very small number of studies. But the thing is, if you work on statistical analyses and you sort of basically want to rule things out at the 95% level, 5% of the time, like 1 in 20, you're going to get a study that, you get something weird, right? That's just going to happen, right? And so this is one of the things that we struggle with because you have to do science statistically, that every now and again, you're going to get something that just looks a bit weird.
Yeah. And also people who feel as though they have some type of spiritual awakening or they know something because they've been communicated with something outside of their body or God or whatever terminology that it might be. I don't know how you could to delineate between that and your regular emotions that you're feeling anyway. Like it seems to me that would be almost impossible to determine if you're feeling something where it's coming from, and that if it's outside of you, how you could determine that it's not just your emotion believing that. Am I making any sense to that question?
Well, I mean, certainly people can have experiences that are, and again, I don't want to get on this because I'm not the kind of person who's going to put other people down, but yeah, you can have experiences where your brain just goes through an hallucinatory issues or state and whatever. That is known to happen. People have been documented in those kind of states. So there's a lot of things that go on with the brain, right? I mean, there's lucid dreaming, all of these things and so on, where you can literally be in a state where you feel something is happening and it's actually not, right? So all of these things are possible and are part of the human experience, right? So it doesn't surprise me when, like, my elder sister is like, oh, I was talking to so-and-so the other day, and I know they passed away 6 months ago, and I was just talking with them. And I'm like, that's my sister, right? She truly believes what she says, or at least I think she truly believes what she says, right? And so I just sort of, like, I sort of nod my head, shake my head, and Ray goes, you don't believe me, do you? And I'm going, I'm sorry, Ray. No, I don't. Yeah. But we have an honest discussion about it, and I'm not putting her down because I know she believes it, right? But I can't take that kind of thing at face value because for anything like this, it's such an incredibly huge thing to say, right? To suggest that you can communicate with someone who's dead, right? That you have to put the standard of proof on that at a very, very high level, right? And unfortunately, that's going to stop a lot of other people's viewpoints and opinions and so on.
Indeed. 902-405-6000. Aaron, hello.
Hi, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. You?
Not too bad. Just have a question for the doctor.
Sure.
It's about psychic connections and stuff like that. I was just wondering if you'd heard any of the latest studies about autistic children and some of the experiments that have been done recently that are saying that there's a possibility that there is psychic abilities through autistic children and their parents.
Yeah, I'm really not going to get into this because it's just something where you need to see what the study is. As I pointed out, if you do things on the basis of a statistical analysis, then there will be scenarios, if you're using a 95% confidence interval, where things just don't match what you expect.
This sounds pretty solid, these studies. This is quite recently, and there's been a fair bit of talk about it and a lot of experiments that have seemingly proven that there may be something to it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to let me be skeptical.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. We got Rob to the top of the hour. Got some room for you as well. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. Right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Joining us is Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hi, how are you?
We're well.
I just have a quiet question just about the brain and stuff. Just out of curiosity, I know he doesn't like answering questions like this, but does he believe in different levels of consciousness?
In what sense, Joe?
Just like they say that there's 10 dimensions of consciousness, from a spiritual point of view, where 10 is godlike and 1 is like an inanimate object in a sense.
Okay, how can I answer this? So, I mean, you certainly do have different states of consciousness in the sense that all of us know that sometimes we can be in this mixed state between being awake and being asleep, right? That's possible. And to be frank, consciousness is something where there's no real scientific theory for what it is. And that's something that pretty much anyone who works in the area will admit. Now, what do? We look for things that correlate with consciousness, and we've been doing that for a long time, and there are a lot of so-called neural correlates with consciousness, right? But in terms of, do I think there is some sort of like state of consciousness that taps into a communication layer or something like that, then I'd have to say, again, I'm very skeptical, as I was trying to point out. One of the nature of science is such that if you rely upon ruling things out, then someone will always say, well, what about the experiment where something happens? Does that mean that you can't rule it out? So you can only ever work to certain levels of probability, right? So I would generally take the position that all of what I have seen, and again, I'm not a researcher in neuroscience is such that, no, we have our individual consciousnesses, but they're not linked to any kind of higher plane or anything like that.
Okay, so if you don't mind, just take it a little bit further. So then you have the problem that you've been trying to deal with for the last month. I don't know what it is. It can be made up or not. But then all of a sudden, after sleeping it on it for 30 days, your subconscious, when you wake up in the middle of the night some night, boom, you have the solution.
Yeah.
Right? So is that's two different states, right?
No, that is actually completely reasonable, though, right? Because what you need to remember, though, is about sleep. Sleep is a process by which the brain does a lot of shuffling bad crap out and building new connections as well. That's happening while we're sleeping, right?
Correct.
So it's more than possible that you actually haven't been able to resolve the issue, but for whatever reason, you go through a state where, when you're sleeping, whatever that is, whether it was, I don't know, some kind of REM sleep or whatever, where that particular route becomes a possibility for you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. Vanessa's got one other caller that she's locking in, so let's get to Glenn. Hi, Glenn. Go ahead.
Oh, hi there.
Hi there. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hey there. Yeah, just have a quick question there. Like, if I have a 9-volt battery and I stuck it in my pocket with some change, my leg felt like it was going to catch on fire, but no other battery will do that. I'm just curious why a 9-volt battery will do that versus a AAA or whatever like that.
It's probably the voltage, right? So a 9-volt battery is a bit higher than the AAA is going to give you. I think they're 1.5. So the other thing that is well known by kids everywhere is if you lick a 9-volt battery, you'll feel it. You'll feel it in your tongue. So there's enough power in a 9-volt battery that, you're actually going to be able to feel the electricity from that.
Weird. Okay. Fair enough.
All right.
Sure.
All right. Take care. Hello, Dean.
Hi, it's Dean here. I was just going to ask the doctor if he knows anything about vanadium redox batteries.
Vanadium redox batteries, not off the top of my head. I mean, so redox reactions are one of the chemical reactions that will give you an applied potential difference. Like, I know that. But in terms of overall, so as far as I know, I vaguely think these are the type of batteries that are used in grid storage, if I remember.
That's what I seem to understand.
Yeah. But off the top of my head, it's not something that I could espouse knowledgeably on for a very long period of time. No.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's not something that would be common here in North America.
So redox batteries have certainly been used in battery grid situations. So I know that there is a design for batteries that's been used at a number of places in the US. The question about them is literally there's quite a lot of infrastructure you have to build because, again, this is something that's based on a chemical reaction with fluids going around, and they're not as sort of like simply integrated as, say, something like a lithium-ion battery would be. But they've been used in a number of places that I've seen, and I don't know whether that's at the prototype level or whether they're... But if I remember correctly, that they tend to build them in big containers that you can put on trucks and move around as well.
Oh. All right, thank you for your time.
Okay, no thanks problem. A lot. Thanks so much for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Thanks, Rob Thacker, for coming in. We appreciate it as always.
Thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
All right, you got it. Rob Thacker, astrophysicist at St. Mary's University. And that is the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks to Vanessa Van Ness as well on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.